Can you also see the comment bar right here or no?
No, I
No?
just see that you've gone live, but that's pretty much it.
Okay, cool. So while we are actually live, people have the option of like commenting on like Facebook or YouTube. And if they do, I will do this thing where it allows me to share it. So like I'm gonna comment and then I'm gonna show you. So if I show it, can you now see that?
Yeah, it says like comment and it has like the little
Yes,
thumbnail.
exactly. So I'm gonna put that there if someone does comment, like if they have a question for you or something, so you'll be able to see it too.
Awesome. All right.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna do my intro. Hi, I'm Shayna, and welcome back to the PCOS Life, where we talk all things PCOS. Today, we have Venus here, who's going to share her story with PCOS and a little bit about her health journey. There's a couple of really interesting things that I want to focus on or point on during her story because I think it's interesting that one, she was given birth control really young. And having to deal with the stigma that came along with that and the difficulties of even like being bullied and a bunch of other things. Also, the quality of treatment based on insurance, race, and income, which is something that we talk a lot about. And then lastly, the one that I find most frustrating is the refusal to get a hysterectomy. I've heard this actually many times from people on my TikTok, simply because it was going to be solely her choice and there wasn't a man present to determine whether that was, the right choice. So that's something that I also want to talk about because I think is really interesting and obviously needs to change. So yeah, I want to turn it over and introduce you to Venus.
Hi. So very simple. I guess my name is Venus. I'm originally from the Bronx. I right now I'm in Jersey, so that's a whole different story, but it's all good. Yeah, and I just wanted to talk about my experiences and everything I've kind of gone through with the ups and downs of having PCOS since I was 12, actually, when I was diagnosed. So, yeah.
Yes, crazy. Um, for a couple of reasons. One being that like I don't think anyone that young should be diagnosed with PCOS just because they have no understanding of our hormones, but for
Yeah.
another video. So one, I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to share your story because it is obviously a very personal thing. But like I've said before, and I'll say it again, I think it's so telling that people are willing to share their story.
Yeah, thank
Um,
you for having me because it's definitely something I feel like people need to talk more about, and they're kind of afraid to say what they want to
yeah,
say about it a lot of the time. So it
yeah.
works.
I completely agree. So, I guess the first question I have is, what were the symptoms or things that you were experiencing that kind of gave you the inclination something was not right?
Okay. Well, my first menstrual cycle started at 9 years old, which was extremely early, and that was kind of a red flag already that something might have been wrong. When I hit about like 11 to 12, I started having like cycles, but however, my cycles would last for about 2, 3 weeks straight of heavy bleeding and not necessarily pain, which was kind of like, I guess, the good thing about it. But the only thing was it would disappear for months. And then when my cycles would start again, 2, 3 weeks straight, heavy bleeding, and I became anemic. So at one point, I had to go to the emergency room because of the level of bleeding. And that's kind of how they found that out when they did a series of blood work. So they did some lab tests, and that's how they were able to kind of see that hormonally there was some imbalances, and they automatically charted it off as PCOS at that point.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy. Um, And so what was the treatment then? I mean, you were really young, so I'm sure it was kind of you were just there with like your parents and
Yeah.
you just went in, told them what was happening, and then whatever they said, you were just like, okay, because you're a
Yeah.
child, right?
Was super uncomfortable. I remember it very vividly because I was basically in a hospital bed in the emergency room, and the doctors kind of came over to my mom and let her know, like, oh, well, she has like a hormonal condition. They didn't go into detail. The only thing they gave me was progestin to stop the bleeding, and then after that, they gave me a series of birth control. So they gave me like a very, I think it was, I'm trying to remember which one it was, but it was one of the lower doses that they could give me, and they started me off with that at 12 years old. After the progestin should just stop the cycle. So then they were like, okay,
Mhm.
you're gonna have to take birth control now to regulate your periods because without that, you're gonna have the same problem continuously. But after that, it was pretty much just that, like, here you go, birth control, be about your business, and that was that. And
Yeah.
the follow up wasn't much better, I would say. It was pretty much just like continue to take these medication, continue to kind of just follow up, and that's it. And yeah, the cycle parts slowed down, but a lot of the other symptoms progressed, and they didn't really touch on that a lot at all when it came down
Yeah.
to it. So
Yeah. So, and how did you, I mean, I don't know if you remember because it was kind of a while ago, you were young, but how did you feel with that as a 12-year-old girl being told like you have to take birth control?
Oh, it was horrible because I had to take it with me to school because the way the schedule was planned out, I would take it first thing in the morning and I would have to carry it in my backpack and I would take it to school. And then the worst thing that would happen was that a lot of the kids saw that I would stop and take this pill. And of course, because their parents teaching them certain things, they're like, oh, you must be sexually active because that's the first thing they think of when they think of birth control pills. They don't realize that it's a medical condition. They don't realize that this might be helping me regulate something because we're kids. We don't know better.
Mhm.
So a lot of the talk was like, oh, I must have been having sex, and my mom probably put me on birth control because she was worried that something would happen at a younger age. And it was really uncomfortable because it felt like every time I took this pill in the morning, I was basically gawked at for the entire time. And it didn't help that I had a lot of the other physical symptoms like facial hair and I had insulin resistance, which I still do. So anketosis, the discoloration of the skin. So a lot of those things basically made me a target while I was in middle school to begin with. So that didn't really
Yeah.
either. So yeah.
Yeah, and we actually went to middle school in the same, I mean, I'm not gonna say like same area, but the same town. I mean, the Bronx, because I went to school there when I was younger. And the kids in the Bronx are not nice. Like
Yeah,
I will say they're ruthless.
they're
I
rough.
got
Yeah, they're
I
definitely.
got bullied when I went to school back then. And I can't imagine how hard it would have been for something like that, you know?
Yeah, I hated middle school because it was like all of this started to start up when I was going through middle school, about seventh grade. And usually that's not something that's typical. Like you have so many other kids, and you kind of think you're the same as everyone else until you realize you're not the same as everyone else at that
Yeah.
point. And it was just kind of like, all right, well, this is a reality check. I have to kind of go through these stigmas and these kind of like teasing points a lot of the time during school, which was not comfortable, but
Yeah. Oh.
try to call me at the same time.
Mm.
Anyway, but yeah, so that was basically the whole situation, especially with middle school. But we're all kids. We didn't know any better. So that's kind of
Yeah.
like I can't really blame them.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stigma also comes from adults when they think about
Yeah.
things like this. So yeah.
Yeah, very much so. They just kind of follow what they've been told and what they see, and but it
Mhm.
doesn't make it any less difficult, because when we're a child, we don't understand any of that.
Oh, I didn't know what was going on. Like I don't, and the
Yeah.
thing is that I don't even think my mom, she didn't really understand what was going on either. So that didn't help either. There was no point of understanding nor communication about what the condition was and what was going to be like the task to go through for the rest of my life, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, which kind of leads me to my next question was what information did they provide you when you were diagnosed, or even, like later seeking treatment for it? What information did doctors provide you about your PCOS and your
Yeah.
treatment plan and stuff like that?
Oof, there wasn't a lot to be honest. Like as like I'm from the Bronx, and there's a level of care that's not necessarily given equally, which we'll touch on anyway. But
Mhm.
when it came down to it, a lot of the situation with PCOS, or at least with the discussion of doctors, was pretty much just like take these medications and just kind of go from there. Lose weight, which was a big thing because I've always been overweight since I was a child, since I was like a toddler. Always been heavy set, so I've never necessarily not heard that from doctors. It's always like lose weight, lose weight, lose weight, and your symptoms would alleviate. However, no one talks about the concept of PCOS not having a cure. No one talks about the series of metabolic disorders that come with it, which I started to get hit with as I got older.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no one discussed that, and the doctors never really communicated that. And in turn, when it came down to my mom, she didn't understand what was happening. She was just like, "Okay, well, I know you have a condition, but just do what the doctor says." And I'm like, "That's pretty much all they're telling me. Take some pills, and that's the same thing with dietary, like watch your weight, and that's it, lose weight, nothing else." So
Yeah.
it's been a course for years at this point that it's just like, well, control your weight, take these medications, observe, and that's pretty much it. So early on, there was not much inclination of anyone knowing what was happening or how to actually talk to me about what was happening. So I had to figure out a lot of that as I got older.
On your own.
Yeah, on my own. So
Yeah. And so it's interesting because, like you said, kind of those other issues started coming along as you got older. But I feel like when doctors just prescribe birth control as a band-aid, and don't address the underlying issues or the things that can occur with PCOS, like insulin resistance, then you ignore it for a long time. And ignoring serious conditions like that can obviously cause other issues,
Yeah.
and has repercussions, right? And like there's things that like obviously having to deal with it later on. So like instead of where you could have been proactive at 12 years old of understanding, okay, I have insulin resistance, what can I do about this, rather than just take birth control. And now at, let's say, I don't know, when you're an adult and having to deal with the magnitude of these issues because they haven't been addressed for so long.
Yeah, because that was a heavy,
um,
especially with insulin resistance. I've had it since I was probably like, I want to say started to show up around like 11, more or
mhm.
less, the skin condition. And you could tell that that's like the first telltale symptom. And no one said anything about that. Like no one knew about it. So that stood undiagnosed for a long time as well, which made it worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what other, did you take any other medications for it, or was it just the birth control, or kind of like how did that go
At 12, it
as you
was,
got older?
yeah, it was just a birth control at 12. That was pretty much the way of maintaining it. I was not put on metformin until like I was about 19. So from 12 to pretty much 19 years old, I was just taking strictly birth control. And then that's when they started to realize like the insulin resistance and diabetes started to creep up. And that's when I started seeing another doctor at 19, still in the Bronx. And she was the pretty much the doctor that first told me like, oh, you're basically infertile. She's like, you're not gonna have kids, you're not gonna, that's already, just take that off the table. We're gonna start you on metformin. She's like, that could help regulate your cycle a bit at the same time, but then it's also gonna try to help with your blood sugars and your levels and stuff like that. And metformin is just disgusting to start off, like especially early on when you first start taking it. It is one of the most uncomfortable kind of situations, medicine wise. Like I would think a lot of people who take metformin would understand how bad it is, because it just gives you so many different side effects, and then it doesn't feel like it fixes anything at all. It just kind of is another band-aid, another like kind of placebo effect. So
Mhm.
that's the whole thing with that. But before that time, yeah, it was strictly just birth control. So when I got older, that's when a lot more of the other conditions started to kind of pop up out of nowhere, and that became more of a cause for alarm at that point.
Gotcha. And so how did you feel about that treatment plan? Like, did you agree with taking the metformin, the birth control, or did you want more information?
Like I talked, that doctor in particular, she was very, I want to say she was a little bit more communicative, because I was left in charge of my medical care as soon as I turned 18. Like my mom was like, no, you're on your own with that. So that's a whole different story, but I basically had to take charge of that on my own. I didn't have much of a support system. So a lot of the stuff was just me and the doctor kind of breaking this down and trying to understand like what exactly is happening. So, she would read my blood results, and it would show like my insulin was a little high, or glucose was high, or the A1C was high, and it'll be like, okay, well, this can help bring it back down. So in my mind, I'm like, okay. And it's like, of course, dietary changes on top of that, but the first kind of line of defense they hit you with is medication,
Yeah.
because like it's going to bring it down immediately. It's going to start to give that process for your body to regulate, little by little. So that was the first thing. So it was always just like, we're going to hit you with this, then we're going to just kind of watch and see, and then come back in 3 months. That's pretty much all it is. So for 3 months, you're pretty much on your own. Like that's all it is. They give you a treatment plan, which is essentially watch your intake, exercise, take the meds, and then see us again in 3 months. But you don't really have a consistent kind of plan in action between that time. And unless like your doctors are proactive enough, or you're also proactive enough to know what your care treatment is, like you're not really gonna be on top of it too much, depending on the situation, especially at that age. It's a little like you think you're untouchable when you're like
Yeah.
19, 20 years old.
Yeah.
Like you don't really
Sure.
care. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that was basically me. Like I was like, all right, I think I'm okay, and I would see my levels improve, and I'll be like, oh, okay, it's not that that bad. But as you get older, that becomes a different story.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and so the question I had just left my brain. I had a question based upon what you had just said. Um, so did you what did you take the metformin? And if you did, how did it go? Did you find that it did help you at all, or?
It helped the levels a bit. Gradually they started me like at like 250, then 500, then from there went up to like 1,000 even, which was not ideal at all either, because I was kind of like, it's a high dose. And it would be like, okay, you'll get used to it and you get yourself into a routine of taking the medicine every day. You're like, okay, well, this is my schedule. This is how I do this. And it would help. It would help curb my appetite a bit, stuff like that, because you couldn't eat because the way you felt anyway, it wouldn't really matter. But it did improve a bit. That was the whole thing. But my whole argument also was I didn't want to be on medication for the rest of my life either. Just to
Yeah.
deal with a situation that unfortunately they don't seem to have another solution for. So that was pretty much the whole struggle with that as time progressed. But it did improve a bit. I will say that much. And some people see a lot of improvement with certain medications like metformin, and some people don't see much at all. It all
Yeah.
depends on the person.
Definitely right. I've heard people who tell me metformin either like works really well or it's the worst thing in the world for them.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I've heard that with metformin. Um, what other things did you try, if any? Like I know you said that they suggested like diet, which is something that people with PCOS always get right. Just lose weight and change
Yeah.
your diet and work out even without knowing what we're currently doing. So did you try any of those things and did anything else help you with your PCOS
They actually
besides medicine?
they actually had me in a program that was medically supervised from around the same time when I was about like 20, 21 years old. And it was through Montefiore Hospital in the Bronx. And they had it basically that I would go and I would work out there, and it was like supervised by doctors to have a dietary and also exercise plan go on. So it worked for a bit because you had to proactively keep going, and it was in the evening and stuff like that. So that was the first medically supervised weight loss I probably ever had that I would probably see. But even then, it was not a big decline in weight. It was very minimal. And it's because
Mhm.
a lot of people with PCOS have a struggle with losing weight and also maintaining the weight loss. And that's something that I think people don't realize all the time. It's some people are thinner with PCOS, and then some people are obese and have issues with weight. But that's usually the first stamp the doctor gives you as soon as you are diagnosed. They're like, no, you're just too fat. Like that's all it is. All of these things will go away if you lose enough weight, which is true in certain ways. That if you lose enough weight, the kind of your symptoms start to regulate themselves, and you start to have your conditions regulate and go kind of in a remission state. But you still have to keep a close eye on things. And the biggest struggle is the weight loss. Like that's something that people don't talk about often. They'll quick to say to say you need to lose weight, but not necessarily show you how to go about it for your body and what's going on. So
Mhm.
that's always the struggle, I think, for me as well. That it's always been like, okay, well, let's try this. But yeah, it's been a long kind of battle with that. And I'm starting to kind of win it now a bit, but after like you could say a good 21 years of trying. So that's the whole thing. So
Yeah.
it's touch and go.
Yeah, and I think like you said, doctors are quick to say lose weight as if weight gain and having a hard time losing weight isn't a direct symptom of PCOS.
Yeah.
That's like telling someone, oh, just have a regular period. Like, how am I supposed to just have a regular period if my condition literally causes an irregular cycle? So I do agree with you that that's something that's not addressed by doctors. And, even, and I've seen plenty of cases where people do lose weight, right? And it still doesn't help. They
No.
still have symptoms. And because it's really dependent upon, like, you can lose weight in a healthy way and unhealthy way, but it's really dependent upon your health. Like, are you getting in the nutrients you need? Like, it's so much more than just lose weight. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So
And we're also
mhm.
targeted a lot with like weight loss surgery, which I'm not against. Definitely, I would never say I'm against it because it does benefit some people. However, I've been hit with that so many times, and I actually almost went through the process of having it done. And even the nurses were like, "Why are you here?" And it was pretty much because I was the smallest person in the room. So
Mhm.
it was a really weird stigma even with that. So that's the whole thing. So it's a tricky kind of situation, I think, when you have PCOS and you're navigating it with doctors that are just trying to help you feel better as fast as they can, but also to kind of help themselves with it as well, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think it's interesting that you tried that weight loss. That what was it, research or was it?
It was
Um,
research actually. It was
that's
something
that's
that,
really interesting.
yeah, the
Um,
hospital was sponsoring that in order to take a study of how many people could lose weight in the Bronx. That's why.
wow.
Yeah, so I was part of that study because they wanted to see if they could implement healthier eating and weight loss. In a sense, we did it in the gym. It was actually in a school gym too, and they would, rent out the gym to have people go, and it would be from the ages, I think, of like probably 12 all the way to I think about 24. So that was the case study age that they were working on, and it was mainly because, of course, the Bronx is, the highest in obesity rates, the highest in diabetes rates, high blood pressure, all of the comorbidities that go along with obesity. So they were doing that as part of a study. I don't know if they're still doing it now, but it was a couple of years back. But they would definitely, that was part of a case study on their end. So I was
That's
a guinea
kind of
pig.
cool to, yeah, to be part of that.
Yeah.
Um, can you talk a little bit about, because it sounded like you were stuck in a place of where doctors were categorizing you as, oh, you're overweight, you need to lose weight, but then you're not so overweight that you need weight loss surgery.
Yeah, it was a weird process. That was back, and I want to say in about 2015, 2016. So I was about like 26, 27, more or less. Um, I was, the doctors were pushing for weight loss surgery because I was heavier. At that time, I was probably about like 265, 270. So at that point, they were like, yeah, you're tipping the scales a bit into the point that is dangerous, and your situations, in the case of your health conditions, are not necessarily as well controlled as we would like. So it's like, okay, let's just try to see if you could do like the bypass. Bypass is more extreme than the sleeve. I've done research on both because that was part of the whole thing when we did. It was a doctor monitored situation that we had to go for like weight management and classes and stuff before that. That was part of the
Mhm.
for insurance. But when it came down to me going to the classes, I was in a class probably with about like 10 other people that were going to go through weight loss surgery. And as soon as they saw me, it was like, you're small compared to everyone else. Because,
So weird.
yeah, because my weight, I've never been super, what we would consider huge, even though I'm like 250 right now. I'm about 245 now. But I was always like, I'm just kind of stocky, a little bit more, chunky. But the whole thing is, compared to everyone else in the group, I was the smaller one. So one of the nurses thought I was actually waiting for somebody at one point,
Mm,
and I was
that's
waiting.
crazy.
Yeah, I was waiting to be weighed. And she was like, "Are you here with someone?" And I said, "No, I'm here to be weighed." And she was like, "Why are you here?" She had the pure look of shock on her face. And she was like, "You don't need to be here." She's like, "You can do this on your own," because I started to lose weight gradually with the weight loss plan that they gave me.
Mm.
So I had started to lose some weight, and I lost about like 20 pounds on my own. So
Oh, wow.
yeah. So at that point, and it was mostly because they gave me a strict dietary plan to follow, and they
Mhm.
stood on top of that. I had to go check in every week. So it was very strict, and that I
Yeah.
come down a bit. So when they saw that, they were like, the nurse was like, "You don't need to be here." She was like, "I don't believe you need this surgery." And I didn't go through with it because it was a lot of the when you learn about the ins and outs of weight loss surgery, it's a lot, and it's definitely a risk. It's a risk that some people have to take because of the situation that they're, in their own individual, kind of life. But it is a big step, and it is a big factor of health risk and everything involved. So I wasn't too much of a fan of trying to get it done. But when I,
Yeah.
yeah, the weight loss started to work, I was like, okay, maybe I don't have to do it, and I didn't. I was like,
Yeah.
no, and I've been dodging that from the get go. Now I'm just like, no, I don't
Yeah.
want that. If I don't, like I said, I don't knock anyone who does it, because some people, it is a necessity, and it does help alleviate a lot of the symptoms, because PCOS will always still be there, but at least for them it helps to get rid of a lot of like the diabetes, the high blood pressure. It helps them lead a healthier life. So I
Yeah.
will never negate that as an actual victory in that sense.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's kind of like with anything else, certain medications, it's just definitely case to case,
Yeah.
based upon each individual. But it sounds like, kind of that their diet did help you. I mean, that's kind of two instances now that with that research, you were able to lose weight. And then also with this, you were able to lose it. What about now? I know you said you're kind of winning that battle now. So
Yeah.
what does that look like in nutrition, diet, or medication? What is helping you? And
It's
what
a
does that
combination.
look like?
It's like a combination of everything now. Because like I actually saw my endo yesterday. I went to my endocrinologist yesterday. I needed blood work done, which I'm proud to say I got my results this morning. Everything is normal. She even checked my
That's
thyroid
good.
because she was afraid. She couldn't tell if my thyroid was slightly enlarged. So she wanted to make sure. What she wound up doing was she was just like, she actually scheduled me for a sonogram. So Monday I have to go for a sonogram just in case. But everything else is basically normal, and my thyroid levels are normal. So
That's good.
Yeah, it's been a good improvement. It's a combination of dietary change. It's also she's had me on Trulicity for a couple of years now. It's I want to say it's not a cure all because it's meant to help your A1C and it does help you lose weight. In addition, it's not meant for weight loss medication at all, but she's been having me monitored on that for a while, and it's like a injection. Not the most comfortable thing. It does help, and I don't have to take metformin as well. That's just something I could just basically take on my own without having to deal with metformin. But between that and primarily dietary change, I don't have as many cravings as I used to. I used to crave a lot of like sugary things, and I noticed that, and I mentioned that to her yesterday. I said I don't even crave like carbs as much anymore. I don't crave all the things that I used to like go crazy eating, like ice cream or like cookies or even bread. So she mentioned to me that once your levels get normalized, or at least like your sugar levels, glucose, everything starts to balance out, those cravings stop. So I get
Yes.
what it is. So, and then
Yeah, and
yeah.
I was just gonna say that a lot of times we think it's us, like we blame ourselves, like, oh, why am I always craving this? Or why can I just not give in? But a lot of times it's the condition itself that's causing us to crave these things. And so it's really literally not us. And
Yeah.
I bet it feels so good when you get to that point of like not craving things because then you feel like you have this freedom of choosing what you want to eat rather than like your body determining what you're gonna eat for you.
And it was a weird kind of like surreal feeling because I've never really noticed that until she started asking me. And I was like, I don't necessarily crave as much. And she was like, what are you eating now? And I'm like, I've been eating more salads. I've been more like poke bowl eating, like seafood, stuff like that. But I don't crave as much fried food anymore. I don't crave as much as of like the heavy stuff. Even my cholesterol levels that were high are now normal. So that
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I'm actually really happy about that because even the weight loss is gradual, but my highest weight, and she even noticed that even when I started seeing her, I was probably like 260 something, and now I'm down to 245 and steadily kind of trying to go, lower than that right now. But I'm also going to start implementing the gym. So that's another thing, which I've been afraid to do. But lately, since I'm seeing that everything else is working, I'm like, this would actually help push it a little further. So
Yeah.
that's another thing to add in. So
I
yeah.
definitely think too, the approach of first focusing on nutrition and mental health is definitely the way to go, as opposed to saying, oh, now I'm gonna try and, whatever, tackle this. I'm gonna go to the gym, I'm gonna do nutrition, and kind of trying to do it all at once because, that can be a lot. And especially with where we know about cortisol levels affecting us with PCOS, right? And trying to go to the gym when we're already still trying to figure out nutrition can be dangerous, or just kind of productive for us.
Yeah.
So definitely sounds like you kind of getting things like it's falling in place.
And I noticed that too when you mentioned like the emotional parts of it. I
Mhm.
realize now that my emotional state is a lot better. I have, a better handle on like depression, anxiety, and all of that because I've been diagnosed with that for a couple of years. And now that I have a better handle on that, it's also showing in the sense of like my eating habits and my dietary habits. And then it could trickle over into just exercise habits. So it does start at one point to the other to the other. And when you do try to rush all of it combined, it probably never works. And I think that's what always has been my issue. I've been trying so many things to try to just alleviate it quickly, and then I'm just like, that's not the way to navigate it. So now
Yeah.
it's starting to balance out a bit. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
3 now, so it has to balance out eventually, but at least better late than never. So yeah.
Yeah, and I always say like it's not a race, especially sustainable weight loss or even just, weight loss that's for your health is not a race. It's going to be a slow, long journey. And
Yeah.
it sucks to sometimes hear that, but at the end of the day, it's so worth it when you are seeing the changes happen and you're not stressed out about what you have to do to get there. Like you're not, oh my God, what am I going to eat? Oh my God, I have to work out. And you're not stressed. You're just like living, enjoying, and you're able to see progress. So
Yeah, it becomes a habit. Like when it becomes a habit and it becomes part of your life in general, I think it's easier to do versus you trying to force it into your life. So I think that's
yeah.
what I'm starting to understand now. So it's the improvement is showing, and that's the best thing that I'm actually seeing it versus just thinking that it's working. I'm seeing the progress of it working. So that makes it better.
Do you think that Trulicity, is that what's kind of the change for you? Do you think it's because of that medication?
It helps. I want to say it does have side effects like anything else, especially when you first start taking it, when it's probably a little bit worse than metformin side effects.
Mm.
I will say that without any type of like depression, it is not the best, especially for your stomach. That is one thing I'll basically throw out there. and she actually is starting me on a newer one that she's giving me to start on Friday, and it's supposed to be a stronger kind of similar to Trulicity but stronger, and it has a little bit more of an advantage versus how Trulicity works. I'm a little bit worried about it because I know I'm gonna get hit with those, the symptoms again of the side effects. So that's one thing
Mhm.
sometimes discouraging about it. It does help. However, it's once again falls into my pattern of not wanting to get stuck on one medication for my entirety of my life because I've been taking that for a couple of years now, and I know that there's a lot of risk involved with it, especially with long-term effects. So that's
Yeah.
one thing I'm a little bit always worried about because it does affect like pancreatitis, it does affect like the thyroid, which is why she was cautious about checking my thyroid as well because that medication is linked to that as well. So that's why, because even though I take certain medications, I research the side effects and honestly the long-term effects that could be there. So I try to want to like not take them for too long if I don't have to. So once
Yeah.
I start getting into this progress of like how it's working, after a while I could probably hopefully take them out of my life as well. But that's basically, it has been helping in the sense of like the A1C levels. It helps with the appetite suppressant. It helps with certain things. But it's like anything, you take it for so long, the effects kind of diminish, and then you have to take something else, which is what I'm kind of going through right now.
Yeah,
So
you get you build your tolerance to it. Right? Is that what it is?
yeah, there's a level of tolerance, and I'm on the second to highest dose of Trulicity. So she's just taking Trulicity off completely, and she's having me take one that I forgot. It's a newer medication. It just came out not too long ago, and it's similar to Trulicity, but like I said, it works a little bit better. But
Gotcha.
yeah, I'm still worried about how that can affect me long term. So I'm hoping not to be on it for too long if I could help it.
Yeah, and I think that, I think everyone on my page by now knows I'm super anti-medication, but I do also obviously support people doing what's best for them and what's best for their goals.
Mm.
And a lot of times certain medications or even supplements can help you get a handle on being like give you this freedom, like I was saying before, right? Kind of to come out of that feeling of even the mental illness that we suffer from PCOS, but also like the craving and the not being able to make the choices you want for nutrition because of the cravings that you have, right? Or the constant hunger. Um, what else? I even think like for me, I would eat a healthy meal and right after I would get these cravings of really sweet. Like I needed
Yeah,
sugar right after, even though I ate a balanced meal. And it's not until you actually get a handle on the insulin resistance that you can then be like, whoa,
yeah, I don't need
I'm
this.
not craving something. I can go eat this healthy meal and feel satisfied and satiated from eating that and not feel like I need to eat something else. Because it is a constant, like it's literally like a person in my brain telling me, go get it, go get it, go get
Yeah,
it, go get it.
for
Right?
and it's so weird. Like yesterday, I had bought because I'm in Jersey with my boyfriend and his his roommates and stuff, and I bought insomnia cookies, which we know that's a big thing in New York City. Because
I had it for the first time last year.
yeah, I had bought because they had a sale and all of that, and I had managed to bring cookies for them and stuff. And I was just like, I ate two last night, and I was like, I don't think I want any more. Like usually, I could probably intake more than that, and I was just like, no, I'm good. Like I already ate like that level of sweetness. I think I'm good. And even today, like I may have like one probably towards the evening for like a dessert, but I think I'm okay. If anything, that's more for them than for me. Um, Years ago, that might have not been the case. I could probably destroy most of those cookies by myself, and it's crazy to think that that's such a big jump from then to now. But it does show that I'm getting a level of understanding of how my body works and how okay, insulin resistance does play a role in a lot of these cravings and these carb cravings and stuff. And then now even going into buying food and stuff like that, things that I cook for myself, I'm like, oh, I'm implementing more vegetables, more protein. I'm not so quick to buy all these sugary things like I used to. So it's like you change your habits basically all around. And I think that's what
Yeah.
about it.
And I think that's why I really want people to understand too. It's like a lot of times we place the blame on ourselves when it's literally it's not. Like it's actually not. Because if I look at the person that I was literally like 5 years ago or even 3 years ago and having that constant my mind be constantly settled on what I'm eating next or what I'm gonna, what sweet things can I get
Yeah.
my hands on compared to a place where I am now where I'm not thinking about food until I'm hungry was is a crazy flip because you don't even know that that's a reality that you can live in,
Yeah,
um
it's a surreal feeling because you basically go from like, because I was like that too, like constantly thinking about like what's my next meal, I'm hungry again and I want
Mm.
all of these things, to basically being like, oh no, I'm good, I can actually sit here and not eat, I can sit here and not really want that and say no to
Yeah.
it. Oh, okay, maybe it wasn't just me, maybe it was just more going on that I didn't understand, so it helps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. What hold on, let me go back. I want to go back to your notes specifically because I know there's other things that I wanted to talk on. Where is it? Because I kind of wanted to touch on, what options. I guess I can pose it in this sense, like what options did you explore when you were dealing with PCOS or even the insulin resistance? What were all the options that you kind of explored with your doctors? I know one of them was hysterectomy.
Yeah.
And what kind of led you to that decision?
Ooh, because once again, as you get older, PCOS has a tendency to kind of progress or do its own little razzle dazzle. So I got hit with a lot of the situations of like ovarian pain and ovarian cyst. I never had cysts for the most part of my life. And then it's randomly started getting pelvic pain. And I'm like, this is weird. Okay. Go and get a sonogram done. Turns out I have follicular cyst and I have a fibroid or two that's kind of hanging out there. And it was creating a lot of pain. It wasn't something that I felt happy with. And also you know, I know hysterectomies are not a cure at all for PCOS. It does help alleviate some of the reproductive symptoms that you may have, that probably like the aches and pains and all of that, and that usually works for people who have decided they don't want to have kids, or their journey of being a mom is not necessarily something they want to do, which is my thing. I'm like, I don't want to have kids. I work with kids for years. It's not something I remotely really felt strongly about. When I was, like I mentioned earlier, when I was 19, my doctor told me, oh, you're probably for the most part infertile, which I've always wondered if the connection of having birth control so young could also cause that as well. But that's a whole different thing, because it's like it might be a thing as well that kind of leads up.
It's a very, very valid topic that we should talk about one day.
Yeah, I've always thought about that. But even with that, the hysterectomy part was mostly to just kind of alleviate the pain symptoms. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not gonna have kids. I don't want to have them. So why do I need this besides the fact of just to have them? Like, I don't think I need to have my ovaries. I don't think it's something that I really need if I'm having problems with them already, and that just is usually not looked at as well by doctors for some reason. They feel like they don't need to do a hysterectomy unless there's a risk, meaning cancer or some type of like contusion, something that's going on internally that will cause a reason for them to do surgery for it. They claim it's because you're young. That's understandable, because I know the hormone shifts and changes. However, women with PCOS, for the most part, been going through hormone changes their entire life, at least, or even from the point that they get diagnosed with the condition. So that's kind of a poor excuse in my book, at least when it comes down to it, because I'm like, you're not necessarily worried too much about hormone regulation when you're giving people birth control to deal with that. So my experience was that, like I mentioned before, I went with my ex-husband because I was having these problems, and once I got the sonogram back and I was able to see what was happening, I said, well, I have a pretty large ovarian cyst on my right side, I believe it is. So I'm like, can I just go through a hysterectomy at this point?
Yeah.
It's not anything urgent for us, at least, to have kids. I've always been a person to want to adopt if I decided to have children. And I was told by a male doctor, plain and simple, oh, well, he might want to have kids, so we can't do that to you. And just it completely just threw off what I was talking about, and went straight to my ex-husband and was like, oh, well, you might want to have kids, so you should think about this. And he was just furious about it, because he said, no, me and her discussed what we want to do. She's talked to me about what she wants to do. This is for her health, her care. Why are you worried about me? It has to do with her. And the doctor was like completely just like, he tried to throw it off to the whole thing of, oh, you're too young for a hysterectomy. But to me, it's like, why couldn't you start it off with that if that was the case? For you to basically go and say, well, he might want to have children, basically throws it off to the point that it's more important for him than it is for me. And that seems to be the healthcare system for women in general. It's like, okay, if it doesn't necessarily benefit a man, we don't care about what happens to your body or how you feel about it. And I was faced with that directly head on, and I never saw him again after that. That doctor, I was just like, in order to not do anything I was not supposed to do, I said, you know what, I would never see him again. And I never went back. And that's when as I got older and I got once again, better insurance, that's another thing. I managed to see a series of doctors that are women based and I'm able to be more comfortable with, and I could discuss these options with them. Hysterectomy has been taken off the table for now because I've been having a handle on that as well. And I don't necessarily want to go through kind of the recovery system of that as well, unless I have to at this point. But at that point, I was pretty desperate because the pain was definitely heavy, especially when it was first happening. So now it's kind of like, okay, it's bearable. I could deal with it, but I keep a close eye on it as well because I'm not too sure what can happen with that. So yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy. And I mean, that's not the first story I've heard about this, about women being denied a hysterectomy simply because a man in the future may want children.
Yeah,
And the woman I've heard this from are like, not really young. They're in their late 20s, in their 30s. And it's baffling that the healthcare system still doesn't deem women as important, or as, I don't know, as
I guess as liberated as we want to.
equal. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's not we're not equal to men. We don't have the autonomy, the body autonomy that we think we do, or that the world wants us to believe that we do, because clearly, a man can go get a vasectomy
yeah,
without any questions,
yeah.
without
And
any regards.
through the whole process of having to sit here through like a court of fire basically to like have a hysterectomy done, or any, honestly, any kind of reproductive
Tubes tied. Hmm.
yeah, any procedure you want to get done automatically is like, oh, but your husband, your boyfriend, a man in the future may be upset with that. And it's like, but it's for my health, it's for what I want. And that they don't want to hear that. That's the sad part about it. So
Yeah, I
it's
completely agree with you. Could you also kind of talk about your experience and quality of medical care, based upon the insurances that you had? Because I know you were telling me that you've had different experiences from when you had, a certain type of insurance versus when you got your own insurance.
definitely. So when I was younger, I had Medicaid. Medicaid is basically for people who are on lower income. That's something that unfortunately is huge in the Bronx because a lot of people, it's a bit more impoverished, a little bit more poverty stricken. So I had Medicaid. Even while I was working part time, that was something that I was still managing to deal with. But unfortunately, at least in my experiences, being able to tell now from having better insurance for my job and back then, the levels of medical care are hugely different when it comes to Medicaid versus whatever insurance you get from your job or private insurance in that case. Yeah, I was not necessarily treated as well, at least in my opinion, when I had Medicaid. I feel like I was basically just seen as another number versus being seen as an individual. Because when you go in, it's a rush situation. It's like, oh, okay, well, we look at this. Here you go, take some medication. We'll see you again 3 months. That was pretty much my experiences dealing with doctors, and also just kind of just being one of like maybe 100 or 1,000 people they were seeing on a weekly basis, and not necessarily having that level of personal care, that you could feel free to talk to your doctor about your situation and what you want to kind of work on and stuff, because they don't have the time nor the patience to deal with you because they're dealing with so many other patients. And it's also, they're not necessarily probably getting paid as much as they want to get paid because they're dealing with, a different kind of system at that point. They're not dealing with what you want to say like more elite patients or people that could pay more, their premiums are higher or anything like that. I think that's really a distinct difference, because I now could say that I have some of the best doctors through NYU now in Manhattan. I don't even go through the Bronx anymore to go through doctors. I go straight to NYU and they take their time. They sit there with me. It's more interpersonal. We could talk and joke like we've known each other for years. And it's such a sad thing to think about, because I'm like, years ago when I was really going through it heavily, in the beginning stages, that I wish I had that care then, because it would have been easier to probably navigate and know what to do when it came down to doctors and being able to discuss things with them. So now I'm able to sit there with my doctors and take my time and talk about, well, I noticed this symptom. What should I do about this? I can actually message them and have them correspond with me on aftercare and things like that. That was something that they do not allow with that type of insurance when it comes down to Medicaid. So you're not seen as an individual at all. I think you're seen more of as a group of like, this is the group of poorer Latinos. They can't afford, premium care. So we're not going to give them that. We're going to give them subpar care. And it's a big distinctive difference, but it is sad to think about when you look at it, and it's still happening. That's the worst part about it. Years later, it's still going on. So yeah.
Yeah, most definitely still going on. And I think the crazier part is that for some people, it'll just be their reality, right? Like they won't even know that doctors would take the time of day to actually help you because all they have experienced was doctors rushing you in and out of the office, not listening to you and disregarding you. Um, and so I think it's important that we continue sharing our stories, and because it helps others understand that that's not the standard, right? And it helps others to know that they're not alone in what they're going through. Like this isn't an isolated case that you were treated wrongly. It's actually something that happens very often, and it is, unless we advocate for ourselves, we're not going to receive proper care.
And
So
big one. I think even more so now, I feel like a lot of people don't realize that like you will automatically get kind of criticized or kind of just stigmatized based on your background, your race, your gender. It's the people think that that doesn't happen as often as it does. It really does. If you compare, I've had doctors tell me straightforward like, "Oh, you have excellent insurance. Like your insurance allows you to see everybody," and they just throw that out there, and I'm just here like, it's because of my job. It's not even because I think if it wasn't because of my job, I would not have that, that actually happened. I would not have that experience. So,
yeah, yeah, I agree. What what would you like to say to the PCOS community? Um, and also, what would you have to say to the American healthcare system if you could?
well, for the PCOS community, I'll definitely say never stop questioning, never stop advocating for yourself, never be afraid to ask questions and try to honestly do a lot of research because I feel like even in my case of years of navigating PCOS, I know more than most of my doctors do. And that's a sad kind of reality because I could sit there and honestly talk to doctors about my condition and like, oh, well, symptoms and stuff like that. And I feel like a lot of us don't necessarily share our stories. I've come across so many people now who have PCOS. I've come across a lot of women have told me like, yeah, I've had it for years and I still don't understand it. And I share my experiences with them because I honestly got it at a younger age. So I'm able to sit here and tell them all the things that I've gone through. And if you're, at least in the case, I'm not a mother, but if you are a mother, especially you're noticing like these things with your daughters, especially, please have them get checked out and definitely try to navigate it with them because it could be a very lonely kind of like and just really complicated and emotional journey that they're going to go on with this condition. So that's something I would definitely say. With the healthcare system, I want to just say do better. Because honestly speaking, we honestly need more funding when it comes to dealing with PCOS. It would be nice to eventually have a cure for this, or at least have a better way of navigating things without having to just kind of stick medication so quickly down people's throats, without having a plan of action in place of how to navigate this disease and honestly how to beat it, because there's so many different things with this disease that is not just the fertility part of it, which I think a lot of doctors and a lot of people necessarily kind of focus in on. We have a risk for cancer, we have risk for heart disease, we have risk, for a lot of things when it comes down to diabetes complications. So there's so many things that I feel like need more focus. And I feel like it's the fertility part is a huge one, but I feel like we also need to have doctors focusing on everything else that's a part of it and not necessarily be so quick to just substitute proper medical care with just medication. There's other ways of going about it. Supportive care is really needed. So yeah, I think that's the bigger thing for me, if anything.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, it looks kind of weird. I just wanted to put you in the spotlight
No
for
problem.
that second, but I um I couldn't agree more. It's almost as if the medical industry only wants to focus on our fertility because that's the only use that we have as women is to have babies. And so that's the most important aspect of our healthcare, right? Is like, oh, well, you're having PCOS. Let's be concerned about your fertility, as opposed to how else is this affecting you? And as an individual, what are your goals? Because if you're not even worried about conceiving, if you don't even want a child, then maybe we can take a different approach. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I definitely agree with you on all aspects. I couldn't say it any better than do better. And you're
Yeah.
actually the second person to say that, to just say do better, because at the end of the day, that's really what it is.
Yeah.
Uh, they need to do better.
Yeah, hopefully that'll become a reality, at least for, because as we get older, this disease is not going away, and there's going to be still millions of girls getting diagnosed with it as they go along.
Mhm.
And it'll be nice to actually be able to stop that eventually.
Yeah. What about the medical system and healthcare industry do you feel like needs change, and how do you think that that can be achieved?
Awareness is a big one. I feel like generating better awareness when it comes down to PCOS and also the conditions that come along with it is a big one. I feel like, especially amongst communities of color, because it's something that I feel like we don't necessarily understand so much, and we don't get enough education on, enough awareness on, enough time on. Because like I said, I've met a lot of women of color who have PCOS of different backgrounds, and they've gone through a similar thing. They're like, oh, my doctors didn't understand, my family still doesn't understand, because they can't really understand what's happening. There's language barriers, there's class barriers, there's a lot of different things that come in, into play. And it doesn't necessarily help. I feel like it starts with the medical system to begin with, to generate this level of awareness and this level of education to begin with. It would be ideal and it would be helpful, but it's a thing that they have to reach out to those communities that are not necessarily as, like, they would say educated, or they would say a lot of different things. It's like, yeah, but that's, you're not bringing that to us enough. Like I said, I've met people, I've worked with kids, I've had to talk with even parents about PCOS and things that they notice with their children, and I'm like, that's crazy how their doctors are not even giving them that level of care. So it's something that has to be done, at least gradually, because I feel like in certain communities that awareness is given, that level of care and understanding is given, but in a lot of our communities, not so much at all. And I
Yeah.
think that with a lot of medical conditions, but especially right now with the topic at hand being PCOS, it seems to be a big one with that. Because once again, focus is on fertility, but they don't talk about the heart disease parts, they don't talk about the cancer parts, they don't talk about the thyroid issues, they don't talk about everything else in between. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there needs to be equality in the education. Cause like you said, right? Like, doctors will take time of day for certain people with certain insurances, or even just based upon race and gender, as opposed to spending the time on each patient the same.
That's
And I think the healthcare industry at whole has forgotten that they are the experts, for us as a society when it comes to health. And they are doing us such a disservice by not educating us with the health issues that we have,
mhm.
They kind of, like you said, they just want to give us medication and send us on our way, as opposed to actually educating us on what's going on.
Yeah,
And that education and that quality and care shouldn't be dependent upon our insurance,
yeah,
or,
that's, or our
or
class, where we come from, or our backgrounds. And that's the crazy thing, that it's like, okay, because I'm Latina, so I know for a fact that the only reason I get the care that I get is because of my insurance. But if it wasn't for that, I would still be going to the same doctors, probably still getting that same level of treatment. Hope maybe getting lucky with a doctor or two, like I did get lucky with that. I had a couple of doctors that were willing to hear me out and understand, more so because of their own like personal experiences, and more so because they were also women of color. So I feel like
Mhm.
why they were a little bit better able to kind of like understand where I was coming from. But usually that's not the case. So if,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's something that they got to work on, but it's also up to us to also fight for that too. And it sucks that we have to, because we
Yeah.
should, but we have to make noise in order to be heard. So that's also part of that. So
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I'm so grateful for you reaching out and being willing to share this story and taking the time to do this interview. So thank you again.
problem. I'm hoping that
And
will too. So
yes, I am certain that this story will. And I look forward to maybe doing some other things in the future. But is there any last remarks that you have for our audience?
no, just take care of yourselves. Do know it does get better. It's not necessarily something that has to forever be this way. I'm a testament to that. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of tears, a lot of stress, a lot of things that you don't necessarily want in your life. But if you want to be able to have a long life, you have to chip away at it, because this disease, honestly, it brings so many different complications, and it can take you out if you're not careful. So
Yeah.
that's the thing. Being proactive is a huge part. Doing your part is also a big factor in it of getting better. So yeah, that's the only thing I will say, and just take your time with it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you want to help me do my outro? So I just go like, bye, like I say it long like that,
That's
annoyingly.
easy.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3.
All right, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Bye.
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 Well,
Awesome.
awesome.